We had fought wars for so long that the sound of battle had become our heartbeat. Plasma fire and the shriek of tearing hulls, those were the hymns of our empire. From the molten dawn of our species, we had conquered everything that dared to breathe. Nothing had ever stood against us. Nothing. Until the silence came. It began as a rumor. Fleets lost in the dark edges of mapped space. No wreckage, no distress signals, just disappearance. Our high command dismissed it as ion storms or data ghosts, but I had seen the telemetry, clean, deliberate erasures. Systems blinking out one by one, as though swallowed by something that refused to be seen. Then they appeared. Small ships, barely larger than our troop carriers, slipped from the folds of subspace like fragments of a dream. Their surfaces were dull, almost apathetic in design, lacking the banners, insignias, or terror markings that defined a proper military presence. They drifted among the wreckage of our forward scouts like mourners at a funeral. Their signal was weak, almost timid, a pulse of data so ancient our translators struggled to parse it. "We come in peace." Laughter erupted across our command channels. Peace? They sent peace to an empire that consumed galaxies? We jammed the signal and prepared to annihilate them, but the moment our targeting systems locked on, they failed. One by one, our sensors dimmed, heat maps blurred, comms flickered. The stars themselves seemed to distort around those frail vessels. My captain cursed and slammed his claw against the console. "EMP interference," he spat. Their desperation reeks of illusion, but the readings didn't lie. Power outputs dropped. Our reactors dimmed to half capacity. Every attempt to fire collapsed into system errors that shouldn't have existed. I watched from the tactical feed as a formation of 20 human ships drifted into position against a fleet of 5,000. Their movement was not tactical. It was graceful, intentional. I felt the first tug of unease then. Not fear, not yet, but a hollow sense of being observed. We launched boarding units to tear apart their vessels and drag out whatever sorcery they hid behind. No resistance met them. No automated defenses. Just silence. Minutes passed. Then hours. No response from the boarding teams. Their vitals flatlined in eerie unison. When I was ordered to investigate, I expected carnage. I expected traps. Instead, I found only stillness. The human ship's corridors were bathed in cold white light. No sound, no heat. Every door was open. Every console dormant. It felt less like a vessel and more like a tomb. And then, movement. A figure stood at the far end of the chamber. Human. Female, by the records we had studied. No armor, no weapon. Her uniform was torn, marked with strange insignias of a forgotten age. She looked at me, not with fear, not even defiance, but with the calm of someone who had already accepted death and found it unworthy of attention. I leveled my pulse rifle. "Identify yourself," I demanded through the translator's static hum. She did not answer. She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the ship's pallid glow. I could feel the tremor of my claws against the weapon's grip. There was something wrong in the way she moved. Measured, patient, as though time itself obeyed her. "Why aren't you scared, human?" I asked. My voice cracked under the weight of my own confusion. For the first time in centuries, I felt the tremor of emotion that our kind had long since purged. She stopped, tilted her head. The faintest shadow of a smile crossed her lips. "Because," she said softly, "we learned long ago that fear only kills those who run from it." The translator faltered, breaking her words into static, yet I understood them all the same. In that moment, every light on our flagship dimmed. The silence deepened until it pressed against my skull, and in the distant void beyond the viewport, the stars began to vanish, one by one, as something vast and unseen stirred behind the human ships. I turned back to her. She was gone. Only her voice remained, whispering through the comms, clear and calm as the void itself. After the silence of that first encounter, we retreated into fear disguised as analysis. Command demanded knowledge. The Council of Admirals summoned historians, linguists, and code scribes to dissect the human transmissions we had intercepted. 1,000 ships' worth of data poured through our archives, radio chatter, news broadcasts, primitive films, fragments of music. Useless, they said. Noise. Yet I watched. I listened. And the noise began to speak. The first images flickered across the command hall's holosphere, burning cities beneath black skies. Metallic birds dropping fire upon their own kind. Men and women in torn uniforms crawling through mud, their faces lit by explosions that painted the night with agony. I remember the silence in that chamber, an empire bred for war suddenly watching creatures of flesh make war upon themselves with a devotion that defied understanding. One of our historians, an elder named Vattel, whispered, "They burned their world." He was right. They had, not once, but again and again. Our records showed cycles of destruction followed by renewal. Each time they came closer to extinction, and each time, impossibly, they clawed their way back. They called one such event World War II. It was not a battle for territory or resources, as our wars always were. It was fought for ideals, for freedom, for identity, for love of something unseen. How could that be? To destroy themselves not for survival but for principle? It was madness. And yet within that madness, there was purpose. We scrolled deeper into their archives. A document labeled The Cold War. Two powers locked in tension, holding the fire of planetary death in their grasp for nearly a century, each refusing to strike. They stood on the knife's edge of annihilation and somehow chose restraint. They feared their own power, yet used that fear to maintain balance. Our commander sneered at the screen. "Fools!" he hissed. They worshipped their own destruction. But I was not so sure. The deeper we dug, the more the pattern emerged. Every scar upon their history became the foundation of something new. They burned forests and built towers. They shattered nations and built worlds. Even when the fires consumed them, they learned. They adapted. Their technology evolved in rhythm with their tragedies. We found the fragments of something called Apollo 11, a machine of fragile alloy carrying two humans into the void on nothing but controlled explosions and faith. Their technology was primitive, suicidal by any rational measure, and yet they reached their moon and returned alive. The recording of one of their kind stepping onto that barren dust played through our translator. One small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. The hall fell silent. The voice was calm, humble even. No boast, no roar of victory, just awe. The kind of awe we had long forgotten. And then came the final archives, the digital age. Countless transmissions, voices, and visuals spanning centuries. Laughter, argument, grief, hope. Across every generation, across every war, one truth echoed. They remembered. Humanity never let the memory of fire fade. They built their future upon it. I watched footage of their world burning under atomic light, and then years later the same soil blooming with forests again. Children laughing where ash had fallen. They treated destruction not as damnation, but as lesson. It was then I understood the look in the woman's eyes when I asked why she was not afraid. She had seen the same ruin, walked through it, lived among it. Her ancestors had stared into the abyss and found something worth coming back for. Vattel approached me later, his old eyes heavy. "Do you see it now?" he asked. "See what?" I replied. "That they are not survivors," he said quietly. "They are descendants of apocalypse. Every one of them carries the memory of the end. It is why they fear nothing. They have already died 1,000 times in their history, and each time they returned stronger. We sent these findings to command. They dismissed them as sentimental weakness. Emotion has no place in war, the Supreme Admiral declared. If they survive destruction, then we will simply give them a greater one. But I could feel something shifting in the dark between the stars. The data streams were more than history. They were a warning. Our analysts decrypted a final human archive, one encrypted message buried deep in their ancient military channels, time-stamped from their 21st century. A voice, female, calm and steady. "If the stars ever come for us, remember what we are. We are the fire that taught itself to burn brighter. Our systems glitched when the file ended. Lights flickered across the analysis decks. I looked out the viewport, into the black beyond our empire's borders. And for the first time, I thought I saw them. Shadows of ships, flickering like ghosts in the void, watching, listening, waiting. It was not conquest that made them dangerous. It was memory. Memory carved in flame, encoded in every heartbeat. A legacy that no weapon could erase. And as the alarms began to sound, long-range sensors detecting distortions near our frontier, I realized the terrible truth. They were not coming for revenge. They were coming to remind the galaxy what survival truly meant. They said Earth was primitive, a relic world, the cradle of a forgotten species that had only barely stumbled into the stars. We believed it. We wanted to believe it. It made the slaughter easier. Our fleet entered their orbit like a god's hammer, 5,000 ships strong, engines burning blue against the planet's pale clouds. The oceans shimmered beneath us, the continents glowing faintly with city light. It was almost beautiful, almost peaceful. Then came the order. Commence orbital cleansing. A single phrase, so ordinary, so rehearsed. Yet it carried the weight of extinction. Plasma lances descended through the atmosphere, streaking fire across the heavens. The clouds boiled, our tactical displays lit with the radiant heat of annihilation. It was over, we thought. Another world reduced to dust. Another victory carved into the archives of our dominion. But then, the fire stopped. No explosions, no impact. The energy signatures simply vanished, like stones cast into still water. Our scans glitched. Readings fluctuated. The surface blurred with interference patterns no algorithm could resolve. Target lock failure, my lieutenant hissed. Atmospheric distortion increasing. I can't read anything. And then the light changed. From the planet's surface rose a shimmer, like heat haze, but vast, global. A translucent veil encircled their world, rippling like the skin of a living thing. Our bombardment continued automatically, but every plasma bolt unraveled midair, disintegrating into harmless vapor. The shield didn't repel, it unmade. We watched in disbelief as our weapons died upon contact with the atmosphere, their energy absorbed into nothingness. Then the shimmer solidified into light, pulsing, rhythmic, alive. "Energy spike!" a voice cried. "Originating from the planetary crust, no, from everywhere." The light turned crimson. Columns of radiance erupted from the continents, each one piercing orbit like a spear thrown by gods. They weren't coordinated attacks. They were primal responses, ancient defense mechanisms awakened by our arrogance. Our outer fleets were consumed instantly, vaporized in silence. No debris, no sound, just absence. The shockwaves hit our ship next. The viewports bloomed with impossible color, hues that bent perception itself. Our armor screamed, molecular bonds unraveling as if reality itself rejected us. And then, amidst the chaos, I saw it. A ship, small, angular, rising from the planet's surface through the maelstrom. Its hull was scarred, blackened, old, but glowing from within. Not with plasma nor ion, but with something deeper, something alive. Every sensor failed to classify it. Energy? Biological? Neither. Both. It rose past us, silent as a prayer, leaving a trail of golden fire. One by one, our systems went dark in its wake. Comms fell silent. Engines stalled. Only my viewport remained active. That's when I heard the voice. It didn't come through radio, nor psychic channel, nor any method known to us. It came from inside. "You brought war to our home." Every syllable carried the weight of 10,000 years. It wasn't one voice, it was millions. Male, female, young, old, layered atop each other like echoes through eternity. The ship flared brighter, blinding. My fellow officers screamed as the light burned through the hull like sunlight through frost. "Now," the voice said, soft and final, "you'll remember why we survived when no one else did." Reality convulsed. I saw our armada not destroyed but unmade, ships folded inward, dissolving into fractal motes of ash and light. Time fractured. The chronometers spun backward and forward at once. My memories bled together. Childhood, war, silence, all converging into the same terrible realization. We were not fighting technology. We were fighting memory. The humans had turned their very history into a weapon, an echo of every catastrophe they'd endured. Their planet didn't shield itself with energy, it shielded itself with experience. The echoes of nuclear fire, of extinction and rebirth, of every apocalypse they had overcome. Each beam of light was not plasma. It was recollection. Pain made manifest. The ship passed through the center of our formation. And then darkness. I woke to silence. No crew, no sound. The fleet, gone. Only drifting wrecks surrounded me, torn open as though by invisible claws. The earth hung below, serene once more, its shield fading into the calm of the atmosphere. The ship, the human vessel, hovered above the clouds, its glow soft now, like a candle's flame. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw her, the woman from before, standing on the observation deck of that impossible ship. Her gaze met mine through the void, and then she spoke again, not in words but in feeling, cold, certain. Absolute! We warned you! Her ship vanished in a burst of light, slipping into folds of space my sensors couldn't trace. In the distance, the debris of our once mighty armada fell toward the blue world below, burning up like meteors. For a moment it looked almost peaceful, like the sky itself weeping for what we had tried to destroy. Stared into that dying glow and realized a truth that chilled me deeper than any void. We had not attacked a world! We had awakened a graveyard, a planet haunted by every apocalypse it had ever survived, and now, by every empire foolish enough to forget its memory. To be continued, we fled. Of course, we fled, the remnants of our once unstoppable armada scattered like ash across the stars, leaving behind a trail of broken hulls and burned-out reactors. The flagship limped through the void, its hull scarred, engines shrieking as if the metal itself remembered the fire. Command ordered silence across all frequencies. No broadcasts, no pings, no light. We became ghosts, hiding in the dark between systems where even the starlight dared not reach. But the silence did not save us. Something followed. Not ships. Not weapons. Not even signatures that our scanners could trace. Just presence. Invisible. Inescapable. It lingered behind every reflection, every flicker of static, every shadow that stretched too long against the bulkheads. It was as though the void itself had learned to whisper in human tongues. At first, we dismissed it as radiation sickness, hallucinations brought on by exhaustion and fear. But then, the voices began to coordinate. "Do you hear that?" one of the bridge officers whispered. "The comms, they're picking up something." I listened. Faint laughter drifted through the static, soft, human laughter. The sound of a child. It echoed through the bridge, though no one had activated the channel. The navigator froze, mandibles trembling. "That's not possible. We're light years from any transmission range." The laughter grew louder, and then it spoke. "Why did you run?" Every console flickered. The lights dimmed to blood red. I felt the temperature drop. My claws shook against the console, though the air was still. "Shut it off!" the captain roared. "Cut all power!" But the ship did not obey. The voice continued, calm and unhurried. "You wanted to understand us. Now you will." Every word burrowed into my mind like static and memory fused together. Images flashed, human faces, billions of them, turning toward us through time. Some smiled. Some screamed. Others simply watched. They were everywhere. The engine core overloaded without cause, then stabilized again. Navigation systems began plotting impossible coordinates, directions leading back to Earth. No matter how we recalibrated, the course reset itself. It was as if the ship wanted to return. That night I dreamed. I stood upon a dead world, ours, not theirs. The cities were silent, our banners torn, our monuments shattered. The sky burned with the same red light I had seen over Earth, and in the center of it all stood her, the human. The one who had looked at me without fear. She stood amidst the ruin of my homeworld, untouched by the wind or flame. "You see it now," she said softly. "You always thought fear was weakness, but fear is how we survived." I woke to alarms. Dozens of ships in the convoy had gone dark. No distress calls. No wreckage. Just gone. Their last transmission, replayed endlessly through our comm network, was a single word. Remember, our fleet was collapsing from within. Crews turned on one another, convinced their shipmates were imposters. Some claimed to see humans walking the corridors in the reflection of the viewport glass, never directly, only in the corners of their eyes. Others said they heard their names whispered by voices they hadn't heard since childhood. Our psychologists declared it a contagion of the mind, shared trauma amplified by unknown frequencies. But deep down I knew the truth. The humans had reached inside our thoughts. This was not a war of weapons anymore. It was a war of will. They were teaching us something. Every civilization they had encountered before us, every empire that had dared to test them, must have experienced this same unraveling, not through conquest but revelation. They made you confront your own buried horrors until you broke. We were children playing with fire, and they were the flame that remembered being burned. The fleet's flagship, the Vorthun, received the final transmission first. It was encrypted in our own military code, one that had never been breached. It came from within our fleet command system, as if our own network had turned traitor. A voice spoke through every speaker in perfect clarity. It wasn't human. It wasn't machine. It was both. You took from us the silence of the stars, it said. Now we give you back your own. The Admiral screamed for it to stop. We tried to sever the comm relays, destroy the servers, even shut down the reactors, but the voice stayed. It no longer came from the machines. It came from the walls. We do not fight to kill, it said. We fight to remind. Every empire that forgets the price of peace must pay it again. And then came the screams. Every ship in the fleet began to broadcast simultaneously, hundreds of overlapping distress calls, yet none of them were from the living. They were from our dead. Voices of fallen crew members, killed in the first bombardment, now speaking our names, pleading for help, begging us to come home. Home. The word tore through me. It was the same word the humans had used for their world when they called it Earth. I had never understood the sentiment until that moment. For us, planets were resources. For them, they were memory. Living repositories of every sacrifice that had come before. And somehow, they had made that memory alive. I ran to the observation deck, desperate to see something real, something tangible. The void stretched endlessly ahead. And then, there it was, light, faint, golden, rippling like the edge of dawn. At first I thought it was a star. Then I realized it was following us, moving faster than any known propulsion. It wasn't chasing us. It was watching. Impossible, the helmsman muttered. There's no mass reading, no gravity well. It's not real. But it was. It drew closer, expanding until it filled the viewport. Within it I saw shapes, figures, millions of them standing shoulder to shoulder in endless ranks. Humans, but not alive. Not physical. Echoes. The same ones who had died in fire and war. Now part of something vast, collective. Their faces turned toward us, and I felt it, a pressure in my chest, as though the void itself demanded confession. Every atrocity, every conquest, every scream, it all returned. The voice spoke one final time, calm and eternal. We are the consequence of memory. You wanted to see the end of us, but the end is what we became. The light engulfed us. Systems shut down. The void went silent once more, and in that silence, for the first time in our empire's long and bloody history, we prayed, not for victory, not for mercy, for understanding we had no empire anymore, only ghosts pretending at ceremony. The banners of 1,000 conquered worlds hung limp in the Hall of Triumph, their colors dulled by ash and silence. The great fleets, our pride, drifted as hollow shells across the void, dead ships piloted by trembling hands that once commanded stars. I walked among them, the last admiral of a dying order, summoned before the High Council not for glory, but for confession. They waited in silence as I entered, their jeweled crowns now heavy with fear. The eldest among them, her scales dull with age, leaned forward. "You've seen them," she rasped. "You've spoken to the humans." "Tell us, what do they want?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Want. As though humans could be measured by desire. As though survival itself could be bargained. I told them the truth, that I did not know. that no one did, that they fought with a conviction that defied logic, with hearts that bled for something beyond conquest. The council murmured, their arrogance struggling to breathe. Finally, the Archlord spoke. Then you will go again, speak to them. Discover their price for peace, or their terms for surrender. Surrender. The word tasted alien in my mouth. When I returned to my ship, I found my crew already hollowed by dread. They had heard stories, entire fleets lost to voices, ships turned against themselves, memories twisted by unseen hands. We launched into the void anyway, not out of courage, but because obedience was easier than hope. Days passed in silence. The stars themselves seemed muted, as though afraid to watch. Every system we entered bore scars of our own making, shattered colonies, drifting wrecks. But amid that ruin, we saw something strange. Reconstruction. The humans were rebuilding, not with machines like ours, but with hands, bare, fragile, determined hands. Cities rose from rubble. Gardens bloomed atop glassed craters. Children laughed under skies still scarred with orbital burns. And somehow, that frightened us more than any weapon. Then came the transmission. It began as static, a low hum resonating deep within the hull. My crew froze as it coalesced into a voice, calm and ancient, speaking in our tongue, though no translator was active. We know why you've come, the screen flickered. A human face appeared, an old man lined with centuries of struggle. His eyes were tired but steady. He wore no uniform, no insignia of command. Just a simple robe the color of dust and dawn. I'm Admiral Kepler, he said. Or what's left of him. The title sent shivers through the bridge. An admiral. Their rank mirrored ours, but his presence dwarfed any of us. He studied me for a long moment before continuing. You've seen enough to know what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. I swallowed, forcing my voice to remain steady. We did not come to threaten, I said. The council seeks understanding, he smiled faintly. Understanding, he echoed. You came with fire. You left with fear. That is understanding. Behind him, through the faint distortion of the transmission, I saw a planet, green and whole. No sign of the scars our bombardment left. It should have been impossible. What do you want from us? I asked finally. His answer was quiet. Nothing. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your surrender. We want peace. My mandibles trembled. Peace? But, he said, his eyes turning to something distant, something beyond me, if you force us to remember who we were. His tone darkened, as though gravity itself bent under the weight of his words. You will not survive the memory, the signal cut. For a long time no one spoke. The silence was heavier than any battle. Then my first officer whispered, Was that a threat? No, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. It was a warning. When we returned, the council demanded details, proof. They wanted coordinates, strategies, weaknesses. I told them none. For the first time in my life, I lied to my own kind, because deep inside I understood. Humanity did not conquer through destruction. They revealed. They held up a mirror to the galaxy and forced us to see the monsters staring back. And in that reflection, I saw what we truly feared. Not their weapons, not their will, but the possibility that we had once been like them and could never be again. That night, I dreamed of the humans' words echoing through the void. We don't want your worlds. We just want peace. But in the dream, peace had teeth, and when it smiled, the stars went dark. The battlefield was still burning when I found her again. Ash drifted like black snow across the plain, falling over mountains of glass and molten metal, the graves of two civilizations. The air shimmered with the ghosts of plasma fire, and the sky itself bled orange from the torn edges of the atmosphere. I should have turned back. Every instinct in my kind screamed that nothing human could have survived this devastation. And yet, there she was, standing. Her armor was gone. Only fragments of it clung to her body, fused with scar tissue and dust. Her face was streaked with blood and soot, her breathing ragged but steady. The ground around her was cratered, the corpses of my soldiers scattered like leaves at her feet. And still she did not move to strike nor to flee. She only looked up at the stars, as if listening to something far beyond the ruin. I approached her slowly, my weapons powered down. The silence between us was heavier than gravity. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "Why aren't you scared, human?" She turned, and I saw her eyes, dark, reflecting the inferno around us, yet calm. She smiled. Not mockery, not pity, but recognition. "Because fear," she said softly, "is the only thing that ever taught us how to win." Her words struck me harder than any weapon. She stepped closer, every motion deliberate, controlled. I could see the tremors in her hands, the exhaustion carving lines into her face. She was terrified. Any fool could see that. But beneath it there was something greater, something vast and incomprehensible. She wasn't free from fear. She had mastered it. "We learned to make peace with it," she whispered, "to walk beside it, to let it sharpen us instead of break us." Her gaze shifted to the burning horizon where our flagship once hung, a shattered silhouette now raining debris across the sky. "Your kind hides from fear," she said. Ours learned to listen. The ground shook as one of our fallen war machines exploded in the distance. The shockwave rolled across the field, scattering the ash between us. She didn't flinch, not once. I, on the other hand, recoiled, my body reacting before my mind could. She noticed. "That's the difference," she said quietly. "You think fear means weakness. We learned it's a reminder that we're still alive." I stared at her, this fragile creature bloodied and burned, standing among the ruins of gods, and felt something ancient stir within me. Shame. Our species had spent millennia erasing fear. We built walls, weapons, empires, all to drown out that one primal truth. And in doing so, we had hollowed ourselves. "You use it," I murmured, half in awe, half in disbelief. "You wield it as a tool?" "As a companion," she corrected. "We don't conquer fear. We survive with it." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw not a warrior, but a teacher. She knelt, brushing her hand across the scorched earth. "Every scar you give us," she said, "becomes a story. Every failure, a lesson. That's how we remember who we are." Something about the way she spoke made the world feel quieter, as if the universe itself paused to listen, and in that silence, I understood. Humanity had not endured because they were strong. They had endured because they knew they were fragile and refused to be defined by it. I took a step forward, lowering my weapon fully. "What will you do now?" I asked. She looked up once more toward the dark heavens where the wreckage of my fleet drifted like dying stars. "We'll rebuild," she said. "We always rebuild." Then she turned to me and there was something like sorrow in her voice. "You still don't understand, do you? We never wanted this war, but every time the galaxy forgets what fear means, we remind it." Her words lingered in the smoke, echoing across the ruins of empires. I felt the tremor in my claws as the reality sank in. This woman, this single survivor, was not the anomaly. She was humanity distilled to its most terrifying truth. Not fearless, not invincible, but unbreakable. She began to walk past me, her steps slow but unwavering. The wind carried her voice behind her, quiet, almost lost to the crackle of burning metal. "Tell your people," she said, "we don't fight because we're brave. We fight because we remember." And then, without looking back, she vanished into the haze. For a long while, I stood there, surrounded by death and silence. I realized I had not met a human soldier. I had met the embodiment of their history, the echo of every war, every loss, every victory carved into the bones of their kind. And for the first time in my long life, I was truly afraid, because I finally understood what made them unstoppable. They were not a species at war with the galaxy. They were a species that had made peace with the darkness inside themselves, and in that acceptance, found infinite strength. The stars burned cold above us, and somewhere far away, I knew the war was already over. Not because we were defeated, but because humanity had reminded us what it truly meant to survive. The war had ended not with victory, but with silence. For the first time in countless millennia, the galaxy held its breath. The great empires that had ruled through fear and fire now spoke in whispers, their fleets docked, their weapons cold. The humans had not demanded surrender, nor tribute, nor apology. They had simply stopped. And then they began to rebuild. We watched from the shadows as they repaired the world we had shattered. Earth, once a scarred husk of glass and ruin, bloomed again. The oceans shimmered with life. Cities rose from the ashes with quiet defiance. And the stars above were filled not with the fire of war, but with the faint, rhythmic pulse of their beacons, heartbeat signals, sent into the dark, reminding us they were still here. Other civilizations took notice. The Vorok, who had once called humans cosmic vermin, sent envoys draped in white bearing offerings of peace. The Kalari, those who had studied us for centuries, built shrines in their likeness, calling them the Children of Fire. Even our own council, now fractured and repentant, began to send emissaries. Not in armor, but in humility, and the humans? They accepted none of it. Their fleets disappeared into the nebulae, beyond known space. Their transmissions grew fewer, quieter, until they became legend. They no longer sought dominion or vengeance. They sought something else, something deeper. But wherever they went, they left behind traces, seeds of renewal, fragments of technology that healed dying worlds, echoes of songs that rekindled the will to live. It was as if they were rebuilding not just themselves, but the very spirit of the galaxy they once fought to defend. In our archives, their name changed. No longer Terrans, no longer humans. They became the keepers of fear, a reminder that true strength is not found in conquest, but in the courage to rise after ruin. Generations passed. Empires flourished, fell, and were born anew beneath the myth of humanity. But deep within the uncharted dark, something began to stir again. It started with a whisper. Energy readings from the galactic rim, distortions that bent space itself. Fleets vanished without a trace. Worlds flickered out like dying candles. And then came the scream. An ancient frequency carried on every channel, older than stars, hungrier than death. The councils of every species gathered in panic. I was there, older now, marked by the scars of wars past. As they debated, argued, begged for answers, the lights dimmed across the chamber. A single transmission broke through the static. No code. No warning. Just an image. Earth. Alive. Whole. Blue as it was before the fires. Then a voice. Calm. Steady. Human. We heard the echo. "We're coming!" Every system in the chamber froze. My heart stopped. The last time humanity had spoken those words, empires had fallen. But this time their tone was different. Not cold, not wrathful. Resolute. Outside, our long-range sensors lit up with impossible readings. Fleets, dozens of them, slipping from the dark between stars. Human ships, sleek, silent, bearing no insignia. Not invaders, not warriors, guardians. Their formation spread across the void like wings. And for the first time since our ancient wars, I felt something bloom in my chest. A warmth I had forgotten the name of. Hope. I realized then what the humans had been doing all this time. They hadn't been hiding. They had been preparing. Not for conquest, but for the awakening that now loomed beyond the rim. As their signal washed over us, the old fear returned, but it was no longer the kind that paralyzed. It was the kind that moved worlds to act, to unite, to stand. Humanity had become what we all should have been, not the destroyers of darkness, but its equal. I turned to the council and spoke the words that had haunted me since my first encounter with them. They are not gods. They are not monsters. They are what we were meant to be. And as the stars trembled with the light of their return, I understood the truth that would define the next age of the galaxy, when the void itself awakens. It will not be our weapons that save us, it will be them. I returned to Earth under a sky of blue. It was strange, almost painful, to see it alive again. The last time I stood upon this soil, the atmosphere had been choked with fire, the ocean's black mirrors of smoke and ash. Now they shimmered beneath golden light, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Forests had grown over the craters our bombardments left. Cities had risen from glassed plains like monuments to rebirth, spires of silver and green, breathing in rhythm with the wind. I felt small beneath their sky. Our ships had landed at the edge of what they called New Kyoto, a city grown from the bones of its own ruin. No guards met us. No soldiers, no fleets, no banners of triumph. Only silence, and the sound of children laughing in the distance. She was waiting for me. Older now, her hair streaked with silver, her stance still as calm and unyielding as I remembered. Her uniform was simple, almost ceremonial, and her eyes, those same unbroken eyes, held the weight of everything we had done. "You came back?" she said, voice soft, almost kind. I bowed my head. "We came to see," she echoed. "Or to understand?" I hesitated. For all our science, all our archives, we had never truly known what understanding meant until humanity showed us. I lowered myself fully then, bowing, not from fear, not from submission, but from reverence for all our power, I said quietly. "We never learned what you were born knowing," she smiled, the faintest curve of her lips. "And what is that?" "That survival," I whispered, "is not strength." Her gaze softened. "No," she said. "It's compassion, endurance, memory." The words hung between us like a sunrise, gentle and absolute. Around us, the city pulsed with life, machines and nature intertwined, working not in conquest but in harmony. Towers of light hummed beside ancient forests. Rivers ran clean beneath bridges woven from living vines. Everywhere I looked, I saw renewal. Not the sterile efficiency of empire, but something older, purer, the deliberate act of healing. I walked with her through the streets as dusk painted the sky in crimson and gold. The people moved quietly, peacefully, their faces marked not by fear but by purpose. They greeted one another with warmth, even as they passed strangers. They remembered. And I realized something my species had never understood. They chose to remember, each scar, each story, each loss. They carried them like sacred fires, passing them from one generation to the next. It was their way of ensuring that no war, no empire, no tragedy would ever erase who they were. We stopped at a small plaza where a great monument stood, a sculpture of intertwined hands reaching upward, human and alien alike. At its base, engraved in a dozen languages, were the words, "From fear we found unity. From unity we found light." My vision blurred as I read them. "This is how it ends?" I asked softly. "After all the death, all the ruin?" She turned her eyes toward the stars beginning to bloom overhead. "No," she said. "This is how it begins." Beyond the city, ships were rising, sleek, luminous vessels gliding silently into orbit. I recognized the insignia on their hulls, a symbol of joined circles, the mark of the coalition of worlds. Our worlds, theirs, united at last. "They rebuild faster than they destroy," I murmured. She smiled faintly. "That's not a gift," she said. "It's a promise." The wind carried the sound of laughter again, children running past, their faces bright, their voices free. I felt something stir in me that I hadn't felt in centuries, a warmth I'd long forgotten, hope, not the desperate, fleeting kind born in the shadow of extinction, but the quiet, enduring kind that survives everything. The kind that doesn't shout or conquer, but simply remains. As the first stars pierced the twilight, she turned to me one last time. "Do you finally understand?" she asked. I looked around. The living city, the healed world, the people who had turned scars into soil, and nodded. "Yes," I said. "You survived the war." She tilted her head. "But more than that," I continued, my voice trembling, "you survived yourselves." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached out, placing her hand upon my arm, a gesture so simple, yet so vast in meaning. "That's all we ever wanted," she said. "Not victory, not empire. Just the chance to become better." The stars shimmered above us, their light reflected in the calm waters below. I knew then that humanity had done more than endure. They had transcended. They had become the bridge between what the galaxy was and what it could yet become. And as I watched their children climb aboard ships destined for unknown stars, I whispered a quiet vow to the wind. We will follow your light, for in their compassion they had found immortality, and in their memory we had found ourselves. The age of fear was over. The age of light had begun.